So the situations we've got at the moment, at present this number has reduced actually, I think, since writing, but about 2.4 billion people in the world have not access to what we'd term as good sanitation, and at least a billion are practicing open defecation. I'd say 663 million don't have access to what we term as safe drinking water, so they can have an improved drinking water which has had some kind of treatment or practiced in order to make it slightly better to drink, but it may not be termed as safe drinking water. It may still be quite heavily contaminated. So this might be not so much of an issue for people when they're just living day to day in an area, and they may think it's perfectly okay to drink a local water supply. However, the people that are visitors to an area, those who have become immune compromised, the young and the old, can be particularly vulnerable to contaminated water supplies. Now, it's worth noting that water supply can be contaminated by both biological and chemical contaminants. Chemical contaminants may be in the form of products from industrial processes that have been washed into the watercourse, or they may be water contaminants, may be organic, and so they may be bacterial or the parasites that live in human bodies. The rural issues are very clear with regards to cycles of disease and what we've been describing around open defecation and poor sanitary practices. But what about issues in urban areas with safe water supplies? As they remain, although you think they're easy to deal with in urban areas, there are some significant problems with trying to ensure a safe and sustainable sources of water are being used by the population within urban areas. And so cost becomes quite a significant consideration. With your water supply comes a water bill, and so where people are particularly poor, then they will do anything they can to save money. And so if they've got metered water, which may be quite expensive, then they may choose to take their water from unimproved water sources from local watercourses. And in urban areas, these are particularly likely to be heavily contaminated. In some urban locations, for instance in the Middle East, they may have difficulty accessing a continuous water supply, and so where there is an inadequate supply of water from the water companies, it may be that your water supply is only turned on for some days of the week, and then other days of the week it's turned off. This may even work over a month, with you only having access to water for 1 week of the month, and then it gets moved on to the next area with a sequence of shutdowns. And this is because in a lot of areas in the world, water is much more scarce than it is in the UK. And in fact, even in the UK, we're not that plentiful with our supply of water, as the water that falls, for instance, on the southeast of England is somewhere similar to that which falls on Yemen. So we get some in some areas of Yemen. So we get some very low water water levels occurring in long, hot, dry summer periods in the UK, and so they get the same sort of problems in other places in the world. And so where the water is scarcer, then the cost of the water can be much higher. And for things like domestic water supplies, it may be that if there is a lack of available piped water, then you have to pay for the water to be delivered in small tankers, or you buy it in large bottles. In areas where you've got shanty towns, you've got unauthorised developments, and these tend to be a character of societies which have had a rapid growth in their economy, and so people have moved to urban centres, and they've settled as close to the work as they can possibly get, partly due to save money on commuting, but also because they work very long hours in what are often quite hard and arduous jobs. And so they want to live as close to the workplace as possible. And even up to the point of sort of some reasonably good office jobs, people may still live within shanty towns because these shanty towns are if they were to move into, let's say, a flat or an apartment or a house, then they would have to move a long way away from where their employment is, and it would cost an awful lot of money. And so the problems that you get with these developments is none of them are authorised developments, and so nobody wants to put in any permanent infrastructure there, as at any given moment a company may come along and try to build a block of flats or an office block on top of them. And so as a result, all these little pockets of land around where there is employment get these unstructured developments occurring on them. And it can be a real challenge trying to provide a safe water supply to people in these areas, whilst working within the restrictions of these areas not being permanent settlements. And finally, scarcity of water and water stress. In some, particularly Middle Eastern and other arid areas of the country, of the world, they rely very heavily on borehole water, and borehole water is water that's piped out from the aquifer in the ground. Unfortunately, because of the fact that as people get wealthier, they're using up more and more and more water every day, for baths, showers, to water crops, to wash their clothes, everything that you use water for in a day. Then the aquifers in these arid areas are dropping quite rapidly, and so they're having to dig further and further down to find the water. And so this is, over the next couple of lifetimes, going to become a crisis in a lot of large urban settlements. In 2010, water and sanitation were adopted as a basic and fundamental human right by the UN General Assembly. And there are actually bits of legislation around water and water's use internationally. For instance, it's considered a breach of international law if you have a watercourse running through your country, such as a river, to prevent the flow of water from that river getting into into another country. And so that way you don't end up with one country damming up the water supply for another country. You can slow its progress as it moves through your country in order to generate electricity. You can divert some of it for watering crops. However, if you take too much of it, that can leave your neighbouring country in an area in what is termed as water stress, where they don't have enough water. And so that can end up causing conflict, and so it is very likely that we'll see wars fought over issues of water supply, and it certainly causes a lot of political unrest in arid areas. So we have a lot of people without access to safe drinking water, and we have a diminishing supply of water in a lot of areas of the world. We've also been using up a lot more water as people become wealthier. So just as a parting thought, I'd like you to take a minute and just think about all of the things that you've did since you woke up this morning that have required the use of water. And I'd like you just to try to estimate roughly how many litres of water you might have used up, and then take a minute and have a quick look on Google and find out what the typical water consumption is for someone in a Western country in a day, and then compare it to what might be a sustainable water consumption for someone in a developing country or an arid area. And you'll see that the wealthier people in arid areas are using up far too much water, and actually you'll probably find that you're using up quite a lot of water as well. And so water and safe urban water supply, safe drinking water supplies have become quite a major consideration, not just with quality but with quantity as well.